now let's pivot to our team in Cleveland. So Megan and Leaundra, are you with us still? There you go. Hey, Megan. Hey, Leaundra.
Hey.
Hey.
Awesome. So, as we said, the flow of today's program is we're starting big picture, sort of at a national level, and then kind of going down to the pilot level. And, I'd like to start actually, Megan and Leaundra, with the question that we ask a lot of our guests, which is just for context, just how are your people? Tell us a little bit about Arts Cleveland, and what was your 2020 going to look like before we got into the mess? What are the things that what's your mission? What were you doing as it relates to arts and music and the cultural ecosystems in Cleveland?
Yeah, happy to answer that. First of all, thanks for inviting us to be on. Thanks for inviting us to be a partner. Actually, although I think I pushed my way into the Revs project on behalf of the people that we serve. So delighted to be here. So our mission, first of all, we're a nonprofit 501c3 organization serving Cleveland and Cuyahoga County. So that's about 1.2 million residents in Northeast Ohio. Our mission is to advance the arts and culture community and in that area. And we've primarily served three roles. One is an advocate for arts and culture, including individual artists and increasingly for-profit creative businesses, as well as arts and culture nonprofits. Serving as an ambassador, so that kind of the translator between the arts side and other industries, everything from healthcare, neighborhood revitalization, economic development, so forth. And then as ally and service provider directly to people who are working in our industry. So that's where we've kind of been. And going into COVID, we were really sort of at this moment of transformation organizationally. We had been doing this work for 22 years, our earlier history in cultural planning and stabilizing the arts and cultural community through investment and beginning to think about creative intersections. And then I took over about 2 years ago, and then there was another leadership transition in our peer organization, the public funder as well. And so it was kind of a moment for us with those two transitions to say, where do we want to go in our partnership and how we're serving the community? And so we were some of our longstanding programs had come to an end. We still had the capabilities, but we're trying to figure out what and who we were going to be. And so in some ways, that moment actually allowed us to pivot pretty significantly and pretty quickly to be able to help the arts community in Cleveland. And, we were leveraging those skills, case making, advocacy, research, convening, all those things that we had built over our 20-year history were like, bam, now is the moment that we need to exercise that and move it. And that's actually what brought us involved with the live music clubs, because we had that history. We'd done some stuff with them around an admissions tax years ago in 2012, some studies that we'd done on the impact of music in Cleveland. And so because that connection existed and because we'd actually brought on a board member who owns a live music venue, he came to us and said, hey, this thing is going down and we need to do something. And I said, can I jump on that call? And then 3 months later, we have 3 months of calls with live music venues. We're involved with NIVA, and now we're involved with Revs. And so I think that's one of the things that is really useful is that because of all of those connections and skills and capabilities, we were able to pivot, we were able to connect, convene that group, and then use all of the other connections that we have to be helping to make the case and so forth. So it's been a really interesting 3 months. It's been a really exhausting 3 months for us organizationally, but I think also feels very empowering to be able to I've gotten lots of letters from folks saying, I'm so glad we have an organization like this right now that could just immediately pick this up. If we didn't have that infrastructure, where would we be and what would be happening?
And I do want to hold up, I think it's an important point, and usually in the show, I mean, obviously this is a show about music and music ecosystems and structures, and I do want to hold up, I think, an important point, which is an organization like Arts Cleveland that is completely cross-discipline. I think that is working in dance and in theater and, visual arts and all, just all other aspects of arts. And, certainly we've seen what's happened, with the documentary film community this year and the loss of festivals. I mean, it just must be really a different level of exhaustion. So again, we're not like fighting some sort of exhaustion battle to see who can be more exhausted and overwhelmed. But I know that just looking at the totality of this and also the ability, though, to look at it as a connected ecosystem, and that music does not live in a vacuum, that these are all interdependent sort of systems that we're building and working in. And I know that the Creative Compass is a part of that. Alex is going to put that link into the chat just so people can take a look at that, but just sort of, again, helping people understand all just the different resources and where policy and philanthropy and sponsorship and all audience engagement, all those different pieces kind of fit together. It's really,
yeah. And I think it's just one thing to really note is that, if I take it down to the level of the artist as being like a core part of who it is and all of the people that they impact, these structures that we've built around them. I mean, many people that we serve are they're working at a nonprofit, they're a teaching artist, they might be a musician that's also gigging. Like there's so many ways in which all of this connects that I think these false connections these separations that we have, when it comes down to the creative workforce or the creative worker, they're working across all of these different structures. And so it behooves us as a service sector to really recognize and support that. And try to eliminate what are those barriers that are keeping those arbitrary barriers that we sort of set up, because there is a lot of between a theater venue who's facing the same issues as a live music venue who's facing the same issues as it's being able to have those conversations in those different contexts and then weave what we're hearing from one to the other, and then everybody's supporting each other. So I think it's that stuff's really important. On the public health side in Ohio, Mark was saying quite a number of things that really, I think, resonated to me. The political divide that exists right now is definitely existing around this. We've got 5,000 cases right now in Cuyahoga County, 43,000 cases in the state of Ohio. It felt like we were plateauing at a certain point, and now in the last couple of days, it's like ticking upwards. And so we don't know. And so you have that as the backdrop. But then you also have this, some tension at the state level between political, like even within one party, which controls like everything, they are between the bodies in the legislature having different perspectives, and the difference between the governor and the legislature and different perspectives. Our public health director, who came out really, really strong and very supportive, was facing a lot of challenges, and she ultimately decided to resign. I mean, she had threats, death threats that she was facing, and I think it's probably not been as significant as maybe what might have been because of the active steps that she took early on. And so there's that's sort of sitting there. And then there's all this discussion right now too around racial injustice that we're having, and the sea change in terms of people's thinking around that. And so you've got this arts sector where there are historical inequities in the setup. Like the reality is, so you've got a sector that's fighting for survival in many ways, or the experience side of arts and culture, against also the stark reality that people of color are underrepresented in that system. And I think that, you've got all of those layers of things that we're all dealing with at once. And so it's a lot to manage. I think that folks that we serve are, some of them have really pivoted successfully to do some really creative new things. Others are just using it as an opportunity to mobilize and connect and say it's time for something different. And, still others are really worried. The performing arts organizations really, really worried about how long they can endure this and whether or not they survive. And for us, those performing arts organizations are really core to our identity at both live music venues up on to Playhouse Square. And I think that, that's something that we're really facing. So the mood is interesting right now, a lot to be able to manage. But I think financial support is going to be really critical to helping these folks be able to make it through.
Well, and I think I want to bring Leaundra into the conversation and talk a little bit specifically about how the Revs sort of model has been rolling out in Cleveland. But just to build on that, Megan, I think, the work that a lot of us are doing, and a lot of people who are participating in today's meeting are doing is, it's tricky because we're having to both be engaged on a daily basis on what do we have control over and what are the immediate needs. So again, Revs is intended to be a very sort of incremental response to a very specific need. And then we also need to be engaging in the broader conversations about better structures and access to capital and how do we do this better across the board. And that's, again, why our organization exists. I mean, we didn't, come together 2 weeks ago because we're like, hey, there's some problems here. I mean, there are very, very important, fundamental structural problems in the live entertainment industry, we're sort of seeing the impact of, 25 years of lack of antitrust enforcement and mass consolidation, and again, access to capital and lack of public support and all the other things that are happening, help exacerbate the vulnerability of our cultural structures. And so we have to be able to do both, which is hard because, again, there's never a 5-point plan and just say, do this and music is fixed or culture is fixed. I mean, it's a very organic, ongoing, changing thing. But Leaundra, we've enjoyed having you in the Revs program, and love for you to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about the work you do with Arts Cleveland, and also, your participation as someone who is a musician and is a practitioner as well.
Yeah, sure. My name is Leaundra Richardson, and I am the Associate of Programs and Marketing at Arts Cleveland, and I've been at Arts Cleveland for about 6.5 years, and I do a lot of the marketing, sending out different email blasts and social media work, and posting on our websites and that kind of thing, and also event planning. And it's just been really great to be involved in this Revs program because it is a music thing, and I don't get the opportunity to get involved in music stuff at work as much. And so this has been really great. And
so one of the things that I'd love for you to speak to, and so again, we have 11 pilot cities. This is not a prescriptive model, right? So we have a national leadership team that is not telling people what to do, but we're trying to learn from the pilots to see, oh, that's interesting, so-and-so is doing that, so-and-so is doing that, are you all connecting? So we're trying to sort of facilitate a cohort model. And it's complicated and tricky because everybody's making this up as we go, and it's, all the challenges that you have in a model like this. But one of the things that you all have been doing, which is really interesting, is so like all of our pilots have sort of self-organized working groups. Yeah, and yours tends to be about 10 people, give or take, representing different aspects of the music community in Cleveland. So you've been subdividing sort of the issues that need to be worked through in a Revs conversation into very specific conversations that then you're having targeted conversations around each Monday. Could you speak a little bit about what that experience has been like and what that's been kind of as a process, from a process standpoint?
Yeah, absolutely. So in Cleveland, we've had about 3 meetings so far, and we meet Mondays at noon. And as you said, we've had a consistent group right around, I'd say, 8 people on each call. And the group includes participants from a number of different local music venues, including bars and clubs that serve food and have live music. And then also a couple live music venues that have a theater kind of set up. And so each venue has specific needs in the midst of the pandemic. And we structured the meeting in a way to allow us to look at different themes each week. Mm-hmm. And during our first meeting, Megan kind of had each person go around and talk about what they were dealing with when thinking about reopening their venues and the issues and problems that they were facing in that. And their responses were very helpful to us. And we were able to take note of some of the themes that popped up in that discussion. And so then I ended up putting together a list of just some of the themes that had popped up. And every week every weekly meeting, we're focusing on a different theme. So some of the themes that popped up included things like musician safety, audience safety, employee safety, and also things like monetizing live streaming, communicating with agents and managers for musicians, and that kind of coordination involved there. And then also reopening in an economically viable way while remaining safe, because that's a really big problem a lot of the venues are facing right now. And during the second meeting, we looked at musician safety. And as I said before, each week we're tackling a different theme. And so Megan typically just kind of asks a couple questions around the theme, and each person responds with what they're dealing with on that specific issue. And the conversation flows really well because these venues are dealing with a lot in the midst of this pandemic, and socially distancing and all of that in the venues is very difficult. And also just trying to keep the musicians safe. And so some of the things that popped up in terms of musician safety were having detailed cleaning procedures for each show. And we've talked about kind of the best ways to clean microphones and thinking about those kinds of things, because microphones are right in your mouth, right in your face. And so just thinking about how to best sanitize those, and also thinking about how to sanitize a stage between bands during a multi-band show night, and how important that is to keep those musicians safe. And we also talked about the best way to socially distance band members on stage, and also how to sanitize green rooms and dressing rooms and things like that as well. And there are a lot of these things for these venues to think about. And over time, we'll be creating a number of different guidelines around some of these topics and kind of looking at that kind of thing in the process. And then I'll also add that this past Monday, we talked about audience safety, and the venues brought a lot to the table when we discussed that as well. And some of the things we talked about were just social distancing at a bar, when people are used to being able to walk up and get an order whenever they want, and how to work in that process. And we also talked about cashless purchases, and how maintaining social distancing and that with the audience members, keeping the attendees safe. And also just talked about finding resources for locations with fixed seating, because a lot of locations, when a person comes alone or when a person comes with their family members, how to best seat them in a venue with fixed seating and to allow for maximum attendance in a social distancing kind of way.
Yeah, that's so, we really appreciate that so much, Leaundra. And part of what, again, has been fun as a cohort model, or interesting, not fun is probably overselling it, but it's been interesting. Yesterday you were able to share a lot of the notes that you've been taking in the Monday meetings with other pilot cities. And so they're able to benefit from the work that you're doing, and then vice versa, as they're developing their ideas and strategies, they're able to kind of inform your group. And hopefully, again, the point of Revs is less about the 11 pilot cities coming to some sort of resolution in terms of their community. Obviously, we want them all to reopen as safely and as quickly as possible and effectively as possible, but it's about making that information then widely available to any city, any stakeholder across the country or across Canada or across the globe, frankly, that can benefit from this information. And so, again, we really appreciate the work that you're doing, that Megan's doing. I mean, Megan, just to bring you back in quickly, I know you're deeply networked with other arts agencies and other arts leaders. And, one of the challenges is just how do we activate networks in terms of sharing information? And I don't know if you have any thoughts or insights in terms of, as this starts to get more concrete and real, we're getting a lot of questions internally about when are you publishing? And, part of what we are really trying to turn our attention to is, okay, what becomes a timeline and the platform and the networks that can be activated to make these materials accessible, not in a way that, not to be disrespectful to a lot of really good work that's happening by a lot of organizations, but not like here's a PDF, with a list of stuff to do, but more like here's a living sort of example of how you can really plug and play and engage in this work. And so why don't we close this segment, Megan, just thinking a little bit about the broader sort of, arts leadership ecosystem and how to kind of activate those networks.
I think it's, I view our role as a service organization. We're a nonprofit, we're not in government, right? And I know I have a lot of friends and peers who are in government around the country, and on the one hand, it has a lot of advantages because when you're inside that structure, you can build the connections that you need to build between departments. Outside, as an advocate, we have to work really hard to be able to get an interface and have those conversations. So they're different things. I think that, for us, we have a lot of flexibility. And I see us as a network of networks. If there's not, creating a master network, one network to rule them all, doesn't necessarily work. And it's our job to be connected to every single network we possibly can. So whether it's art galleries or whether it's live music venues or whether it's, crews. And that's something I just want to put out there for everyone. We talk about venues and we're talking about musicians, but there are crews that are really, really struggling and they don't have anywhere to go. And we had a whole conversation about that this week in another club call. And it was what are we doing to make sure that those guys and those gals that are doing the good work on a regular basis, who all of their work is dried up, that they're cared for and supported. And in that whole conversation, it became oh, here's another thing that we need to add to the to the mix in terms of our conversation, like what's crew safety look like, you know? And so I think that that's a key piece of the puzzle, seeing yourself as a network of networks, being connected to those folks, and you know, us being connected to like Ohio Citizens for the Arts. I serve on that board, which means as we're doing stuff at the state level, I'm weaving information back and forth, you know, and as a part of the structure. So I think being a connector is probably one of the most significant roles that that an organization like ours play. And, you know, organizations like ours have a hard time, right? We're intermediaries, you know, people don't like, where's the value of that? You know, we want to just fund this directly. But I have to say that like in moments like this, these are the times when all of that relationship building, all of that connections really come together, because when you need to mobilize, you can mobilize quickly, and you can move, and you can act. So it's just a plug just nationally for folks like us who are doing this work as intermediaries, how important they are and how they need to be supported. But just generally what our role is making sure that we're connected to every maker that's out there, and every network of makers that are out there, so that we can achieve real and lasting change. And I think it's been an exciting time. And that's where I said, you know, this is how this happened, right? It was us that got connected to you through NIVA. Right. And it was us that was connected to the clubs that connected us to NIVA. And that's what will make us powerful, I think, as a sector, as an industry. So thanks again for having us.
Thank you, Megan, and thanks, Leaundra. And now we're going to pivot. I'm going to bring in Kate Becker.